Understanding communication through capital, labor, and globalization. Vincent Mosco is one of the most influential scholars in the tradition of media political economy. His 1996 book The Political Economy of Communication remains a key theoretical work that both synthesizes the field and extends it into the analysis of digital technologies, communication labor, and the globalization of media industries. Mosco offers a clear and structured approach to understanding media not simply as a cultural or symbolic system, but as an industry shaped by capitalism, class, and control. Mosco's central concern is how communication operates as a site of economic production, rather than merely a vehicle for the transmission of messages. He argues that in order to understand modern communication systems, we must examine the economic relations that underlie their ownership, development, and global expansion. One of Mosco's most lasting contributions is his definition of the political economy of communication as an approach grounded in three interrelated characteristics: historical analysis, totality, and moral philosophy. The historical dimension refers to the need to locate communication technologies and institutions within the broader evolution of capitalism, state power, and technological development. Mosco stresses that the media we have today are not neutral or inevitable. They are the product of specific historical struggles, economic conditions, and technological choices. The concept of totality refers to the commitment to studying media in relation to the wider economic and political system. Communication cannot be fully understood in isolation from class relations, labor dynamics, state policies, or corporate interests. Mosco encourages scholars to trace the connections between media and the larger social totality, including the global economy, cultural production, and systems of inequality. The third dimension, moral philosophy, reminds us that political economy is not a neutral academic exercise. For Mosco, the purpose of this work is transformative. The goal is not just to interpret the world, but to question injustice, challenge concentrated power, and promote democratic alternatives to corporate control. A major innovation in Mosco's work is his early integration of digital media into political economy analysis. Writing in the mid-1990s, Mosco foresaw how the rise of the internet and information technologies would not liberate communication, as many techno-utopians claimed, but would rather intensify the commodification of labor, data, and user attention. He was one of the first to examine how digital capitalism operates by extracting unpaid labor from users, monetizing behavioral data, and creating new markets for surveillance-based advertising. Mosco also critically interrogates the ideology of free culture. He points out that while digital platforms present content as free to users, they in fact rely on enormous flows of value produced through unpaid labor, such as clicking, scrolling, commenting, and posting. This participatory behavior is repackaged as data, sold to advertisers, and used to fuel platform profitability. In this model, audiences become both the workers and the products. Another key area in Mosco's framework is the globalization of media industries. He highlights how communication conglomerates now operate on a transnational scale, shaping information flows, cultural expression, and political discourse far beyond national borders. This global expansion creates new forms of dependency, particularly for countries in the global south, whose cultural industries and regulatory systems are often subordinated to the interests of multinational corporations. Mosco warns that this trend deepens inequalities in access, voice, and representation. In short, Vincent Mosco provides a comprehensive framework for analyzing communication as a site of power, labor, and economic logic. His work helps scholars understand how media is shaped by capital accumulation, how labor is redefined under digital conditions, and how global information flows reinforce existing hierarchies. Mosco challenges the idea that communication systems are neutral or liberatory by default. Instead, he shows how they are embedded in structures of ownership, ideology, and profit, and argues for a communication order that serves democracy rather than markets. For students and scholars seeking to understand the real workings of media power in the age of digital platforms, Mosco's work remains essential reading. His clear and principled framework continues to guide critical inquiry into how communication is produced, controlled, and contested in the global capitalist system. Sve orbit psychologies et le sens.